So, this all started when I was 17, I'm currently 21F. I don't want to get into all the background stuff, but let's just say my relationship with my dad was rocky at best. My stepsister, 20F, was the golden child, and I was the one always walking on eggshells around my dad and stepmom. My stepsister always had this hatred towards me. I didn't do anything to her, but she took it upon herself to make my life miserable. On top of that, her mother supported whatever she did and would sometimes even join in on my stepsister's antics to make my life more miserable. My dad refused to go against his wife, so by default, he'd side with my stepmother and he'd punish me based on whatever lies they told him about me. Initially, I tried to fight for myself, but I quickly realized that nobody in that house actually cared for me, so I began to keep to myself and barely interacted with them. I guess that seemed to have really ticked my stepsister off because she made it her life's mission to make me as miserable as possible. One day, my dad's expensive watch went missing. It wasn't just any watch, this thing was a big deal to him. I didn't know it was gone until I came home from school to find my dad furious, my stepmom giving me cold glares, and my stepsister acting all innocent. I knew something was up, but I couldn't figure out what. Then, out of nowhere, my stepmom started accusing me of taking the watch. She said I must have stolen it because I was acting strange lately and desperate for attention. My stepsister backed her up, of course, saying she saw me acting suspicious around my dad's room. And just so I can be a little clear, the only suspicious behavior of mine was about me mourning the death of my cat who I'd had since I was 3 years old. Of course, I was desperate for attention. My cat was the only thing that kept me anchored when my parents went through their divorce and I wasn't allowed to live with my mom. My behavior for desperate attention was only me breaking down into tears for a few dinners which my dad used to insist we all do as a family. The only reason I broke down into tears was because my stepsister made it a point to joke about how the house feels so much better without my ugly creature there. My dad never tried to tell my stepsister to not be so heartless. He'd simply tell me to stop being emotional. Anyway, I was completely blindsided by what my stepmom and stepsister were blaming me for. I didn't even know the watch was missing, let alone me having to do anything to do with it. I tried to defend myself, but it was like talking to a wall. My dad was already convinced. He went off on me, saying I was just like my mom, who he always called crazy and lunatic, and that I had to leave. He kicked me out right there. I was 17. I had no plan, and no place to go except to my mom's house, which I did. For the next 4 years, I didn't hear a word from my dad, even when I did my best to reach out to him and clear my name. Not a text, not a call. Nothing. I knew in my heart that I didn't take that watch, but they didn't care. My stepsister and stepmom had pinned it all on me, and my dad just went along with it. It hurt me a lot that he just accepted their version of the story without even trying once to cross-check with me if that was the case. I tried to move on and focus on rebuilding my life and trying not to think about how betrayed I felt. My mom, who is not very mentally stable and needs a lot of attention, pretty much consumed my life. If there was one positive outcome of the whole situation, it was that I got to spend proper time with my mom. I managed to graduate high school and then college as well, and my dad was absent from both events. It hurt a lot, but as the days went by, the pain decreased little by little. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. My grandpa was turning 75, and despite everything, I was invited to his birthday party at this farmhouse he had rented for the day. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go at first because I knew my dad, stepmom, and stepsister would be there. But grandpa and I had always been close. He was there for me when my dad kicked me out. He lived in a retirement home, so he couldn't really help me out in terms of a place to stay, but he did help me out a lot financially. He was also my best friend and we got along like a house on fire. So, I knew I couldn't miss such a big milestone for him. I decided to just suck it up and go. When I walked into the party, I immediately felt all the old tension come back. Seeing my dad again after 4 years, sitting with my stepmom and stepsister like nothing had ever happened, made my stomach churn. I kept my distance, but I will admit that every single time I happened to look over at either my dad or my stepmom and stepsister, I felt this huge lump in my throat and I had to physically fight back my tears. I did my best to mostly hang out with other relatives and avoid any interaction with them. My stepsister didn't even look at me, and my stepmom had this smug look on her face, which made me feel even worse. I wanted to do nothing more than walk over and confront them in front of everybody. But I knew that I couldn't ruin a day that was meant to celebrate my grandpa. I was just trying to get through the party when something totally unexpected happened. At some point, my relatives and all of grandpa's friends began chanting and asking my grandpa to give a toast considering it was his day. Grandpa agreed and stood up. He started off by thanking everyone for coming and talked about how he was so blessed to have lived for so long and that he had a lot of wonderful memories with every single person present that day. But then, out of nowhere, he started talking about my father's missing watch. He said he had recently found out what really happened to it, and that it had been stolen by my stepsister. I'm not even lying when I say that I actually felt my heart stop. Grandpa explained that just a week before the party, he had been talking to an old friend who owned a pawn shop. They were reminiscing about old times, and somehow, my dad's missing watch came up. Grandpa's friend mentioned that a few years back, someone had come into his shop to sell a very similar watch. Grandpa showed him a picture of it, and sure enough, the guy remembered it right away. He had taken down the name and ID of the person who sold it, which turned out to be my stepsister. After a little prodding from my grandpa, his friend told him that my stepsister had been in such a panic about why she was selling the watch, that she had told his friend the exact reason why she was pawning off such an expensive watch. She even told him that she would have her mother come up with something so she wouldn't get in trouble with me dad. Turns out, my stepsister had sold the watch to cover some car expenses back then. She'd gotten into a minor accident because she had been drinking, and completely wrecked the front of her car. So, instead of asking for help, she stole my dad's watch and pawned it off. I highly doubt that the repair of her car cost as much as she sold it for, so I have no idea what she used the rest of that money on. Anyway, she knew if my dad found out, she'd be in serious trouble, so she and my stepmom made up the story about me stealing the watch. When my grandpa's friend initially confirmed that my stepsister was the one who sold him the watch, my grandpa couldn't believe it. But Grandpa did some more digging and managed to figure out that his friend was telling the truth. Grandpa also revealed that he had debated whether or not to say anything right away, but he decided to wait until his party so he could reveal everything while the whole family would be there. He wanted to confront my dad, my stepsister, and my stepmom all at once in front of everyone so he could humiliate all of them and clear my name. As soon as Grandpa finished his toast, the entire room went dead silent. My dad's face turned pale, and my stepsister just froze. My stepmom looked like she had seen a ghost. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to cry, but mostly, I just felt numb. It was like all the pain and anger I had been holding on to for the last 4 years just came rushing back at once. I didn't stick around for the fallout. After Grandpa dropped that bombshell, I quietly left the party. I couldn't handle seeing my dad's reaction or whatever was about to happen next. I just needed to get out of there and process everything on my own. I walked out feeling vindicated but also incredibly sad. I had waited so long to be proven innocent, but now that it happened, I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. Instead, I just felt empty. My grandpa came over to my place the next morning to check in on me. He was genuinely worried that he had done something wrong by bringing my family drama up in front of our entire family and his friends, but I assured him that I was very grateful for what he did for me. He told me that he understood how I might be feeling and told me not to rush into any decision regarding my father. He told me that he'd have my back no matter what my father or his family say about me, and also he'd support me regardless of whatever decision I made regarding where I stand with my father. Now, I don't know what to do. My dad has been trying to contact me nonstop since the party. Initially, most of his texts and voice messages were him apologizing and asking for forgiveness. He was saying that he was wrong and that he wanted to make things right. Then they slowly started becoming about how I had apparently brainwashed his father and tried to ruin his relationship with my stepmother. Of course, that hurt a lot. I mean, is there any way that this man would choose me over his rotten wife and daughter? Sorry that was mean, but I don't know what to do with how I feel. My dad is still asking to meet me and talk about everything that happened, and I don't know what to do. I don't think that my dad will apologize for anything, especially after his last few texts about me brainwashing Grandpa. But on the off chance that he does apologize, I don't know if I can ever trust him again. It's been 4 years of feeling like I didn't matter to him, that he could just toss me aside like that. As for my stepsister and stepmom, I haven't heard a word from them, and honestly, I don't want to. They ruined my relationship with my dad and turned my life upside down. I don't think I could ever forgive them for that. So, either for not wanting to see my dad or to forgive my dad and for still feeling bitter about everything that happened. Update 1. It's been a week since I last posted here and I've lost count of the number of comments and messages I got, begging me for an update, so here it is. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented and empathized with me. Thank you for all the advice and your criticisms also. It's crazy how many people actually cared about what I was going through. A lot of you told me to go no contact with my dad, while others suggested giving him a chance to explain. Well, I ended up deciding to meet with him, even though my gut was screaming not to. I don't really know why I agreed to it. Maybe I just wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, though I wasn't sure if he deserved that. But deep down, there was a small part of me that hoped that he'd finally show some real remorse and prove that he was sorry for what he did. So, I texted him back and agreed to meet at a cafe we used to go to when I was younger. I figured it was a good neutral ground. When I walked in, I saw him sitting there, looking kind of nervous. It was weird seeing him after so long, especially after everything that went down at Grandpa's party.
For a second, I thought maybe things could go back to how they used to be, but that feeling didn't last long.
He started by apologizing, saying he knew he'd messed up and that he was sorry for believing my stepmom and stepsister. He talked about how hard it's been for him since the truth came out, and how he feels like he failed as a father. At first, I was starting to soften. I thought that there was a tiny chance of us being able to at least try to rebuild some kind of relationship. But then, things took a turn. He went on this long rant about how he'd been under so much pressure back then, and that he didn't know what to believe. Which, I mean, okay, I get it, but that doesn't excuse how he tossed me aside for 4 years. Then he began to actually accuse me of manipulating Grandpa. He said that he wasn't entirely convinced I didn't somehow stir the pot to make Grandpa turn against him and embarrass his family in front of everyone. I was so shocked by my dad's accusation that I couldn't even say anything initially. I mean, the guy basically admitted he still didn't fully trust me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just sat there and stared at him, while I tried to process how he could say something like that. All those texts about him wanting to make things right, and now he wanted me to apologize? At that point, I started to realize this meeting was a huge mistake. He wasn't here to apologize, at least, not genuinely. He just wanted to clear his own conscience or shift some of the blame onto me. I called him out on it and told him that it wasn't fair for him to put any of this on me. I reminded him that he was the one who chose to believe my stepsister and stepmom without even giving me a chance to defend myself. But instead of taking responsibility, he doubled down, saying I was being unfair to him, and that it wasn't his fault because they, meaning my stepmom and stepsister, had tricked him. He even suggested that maybe I should forgive them because family is family. That was it for me. I couldn't listen to any more excuses. He wasn't sorry for what he did, he was sorry he got caught up in the mess and was embarrassed in front of the whole family. I told him I didn't want to hear from him anymore unless he could genuinely take responsibility for his actions. Then I got up and left. Since that meeting, I've felt weird, at least that's the best way I can put it. I'm relieved that I finally confronted him and saw his true colors. But I'm angry that he still couldn't just own up to what he did. He's still more concerned about how everything looks to the rest of the family than actually repairing our relationship. I feel like I've wasted so much time hoping for some kind of closure, only to realize it's never going to happen. And to top it all off, I heard from one of my cousins that my stepsister and stepmom have been trying to spin the whole situation again. They're telling anyone who will listen that I'm overreacting and blowing everything out of proportion. My cousin even said my stepsister was bragging that their side of the family is still sticking together, and I'm the one who's isolating myself. I don't know what's going to happen next, but right now, I'm done with all of them. My dad clearly isn't going to change, and as for my stepsister and stepmom, they've done enough damage in my life already. I'm just tired of being hurt by people who are supposed to care about me. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm definitely not rushing into forgiving anyone anytime soon. Update 2. Okay, so I was not planning on updating again, but things have gotten wild. I thought I was done with all this drama, but apparently, my family had other plans. Remember how I said my dad, stepmom, and stepsister were still trying to spin the situation? Well, let's just say that backfired spectacularly. After that meeting with my dad, I went no contact. I was done. I blocked his number, and I ignored any family members who tried to guilt me into giving him another chance. But 2 weeks after my meeting with my dad, my grandpa called me and asked me if I could come over to talk. I wasn't sure what it was about, but since grandpa was the only one who had my back through all this, I figured I'd hear him out. Grandpa essentially told me that he had come across some evidence while going through some old financial records of the company. He had been suspicious for a while, especially after everything that happened with the watch, and decided to do some digging. What he found shocked even him. It turns out that my stepsister and stepmom had been running a whole string of scams behind everyone's backs for years. This wasn't just about the watch, they had been siphoning money from the company's accounts, my dad's accounts, taking out credit in my dad's name and racking up debt that they'd hidden from the rest of the family. How did Grandpa find out? Well, it turns out my stepsister had a really bad understanding of how credit cards worked. I don't think she realized that while making purchases out of the company's accounts, my grandpa would have been able to see where all transactions had been made. When my grandpa saw transactions made for nail appointments and hair blowouts, he knew for a fact that it wasn't my dad. My stepmother has always kept her nails clipped and is very adamant about never ruining her hair with heat. So the next obvious suspect was my stepsister. Not only that, but he also happened to find a fake loan under my dad's name that my stepmom took out to fund my stepsister's expensive habits. This wasn't just a one-time thing. They'd been doing this for years, and my dad had no clue. Grandpa decided he'd had enough of their lies, but instead of pressing charges, he took matters into his own hands in the way only Grandpa could. He went straight to his lawyer and disinherited my dad. Yeah, he cut him out of the will entirely. Everything, and I mean everything, that was supposed to go to my dad is now going somewhere else, including a hefty chunk that's coming to me. Grandpa said that by siding with my stepmom and stepsister for all these years, my dad had proved that he wasn't responsible enough to handle the family's legacy. Not only that, but the fact that my dad kicked me out with nowhere to go, and even after the truth came to light, my dad still refused to apologize to me made my grandpa want to leave my dad with absolutely nothing. As for my stepsister and stepmom, they're pretty much screwed. Grandpa didn't stop at just disinheriting my dad. He also made sure that my stepsister and stepmom couldn't get their hands on a dime of family money. He got his lawyer to block them from accessing any of the trusts or family assets. So, everything they thought they were going to get their greedy little hands on? Gone. Grandpa's even going to help my dad sell his house so that none of them can continue to leech off him financially. They're going to be completely cut off. Oh, but that's not all. Apparently, when my stepmom found out what Grandpa had done, she lost it. And I mean a full-on meltdown. She tried to guilt-trip my dad into fighting back against Grandpa, but there's nothing they can do legally. My dad's stuck because he didn't protect his finances, and now he's basically at the mercy of whatever my stepmom and stepsister want to do next. And, here's the kicker. My stepsister had the nerve to try and reach out to me after all of this went down. I got this pathetic message from her, where she was basically begging for help because she doesn't have any money left to cover her bills or lifestyle now that Grandpa's cut them off. She even tried to spin this sob story about how she never meant for things to get so bad and that she's just been under pressure from our stepmom this whole time. Honestly, the fact that she had the nerve to text me about her struggles when she was the reason I was out in the streets at the age of 17 made me see red. Even when she was reaching out to me, she could not seem to take responsibility for her actions and instead was blaming it on her mother. I sent her a short response basically telling her that she made her bed and now she has to lie in it. I don't feel bad for her at all. She and her mom ruined my relationship with my dad and tried to destroy my life, so why should I care what happens to them now? Grandpa warned me that they might try to turn this back on me, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to paint me as the bad guy again. Which brings me to my dad. He's a wreck. He keeps calling and texting, but I've only responded once. I told him that until he's ready to fully take responsibility and stop blaming other people for what happened, I'm not interested in having a relationship. I can't keep putting myself through this cycle of betrayal and forgiveness, only to get hurt all over again. There's still a lot up in the air, especially with how my dad's handling everything. Part of me wonders if he'll ever fully cut ties with my stepmom and stepsister, or if he's just too deep in their lives to see the truth anymore. I guess we'll see. Right now, I'm focusing on myself, but something tells me this isn't over yet. Update 3, well, here we are. I wasn't sure I'd be posting another update, but a lot has happened, and I thought it'd be a good time to tie up all the loose ends. If you've been following my story, you'll know that my life has been one wild roller coaster of family drama. But I can finally say that things are looking up for me and not so much for the rest of my family. After Grandpa disinherited my dad and cut off my stepmom and stepsister from all the family money, things took a serious turn for them. My dad is in financial freefall. Grandpa wasn't kidding when he said he was getting that house sold. Turns out, he wasn't just helping my dad sell it, he was forcing it. See, Grandpa technically owns the property, and my dad was just living there under some fancy trust arrangement that Grandpa controlled. So, when my grandpa cut off all financial ties with my dad, it meant that the house that my dad was living in was also no longer his to live in. My grandpa gave my dad a chance and told him that he'd let my dad live there as long as my dad kicked my stepmom and stepsister out. Of course, my dad could never turn his back on the women who ruined his life, so Grandpa decided to pull the rug out from under them. Within a week, the house was on the market, and they had 30 days to vacate. Apparently, the news didn't sit well with my stepmom, and she absolutely snapped. I mean, we're talking about a public meltdown. She screamed at real estate agents, threatened my grandpa with lawyers, which is hilarious because her lawyer already told her she didn't have a leg to stand on, and even tried to guilt-trip my dad into fighting back. The cherry on top? My stepsister tried to get my dad to sell some of his remaining personal stuff just so she could keep paying off her car loan. Sometimes, I think I dodged a bullet by not properly growing up under my dad's care because otherwise, I would have ended up just as spoiled and shameless as my stepsister. My stepmom and stepsister found it really hard to adjust to their new life, not surprisingly after they were cut off, My stepsister lost all access to the luxuries she'd gotten so used to. No more fancy shopping sprees or expensive trips. Everything was gone, and honestly, a part of me was happy about it. I think she desperately needed a reality check, and this was a great one. And remember how she was asking me for help? Well, I haven't heard from her since I told her off in my last update. I guess she's too busy trying to figure out how to survive without leeching off my dad and grandpa's money. Unfortunately for my dad, my stepmom tried to pull one last desperate move. She filed for divorce from my dad. Yeah. The woman my dad sacrificed everything for, turned her back on him. Who could have predicted it, right? Well, she figured that since my dad was now practically broke, there was no point in sticking around. She probably thought she could get a hefty settlement from him, but unfortunately for her, there was nothing left to take. Grandpa made sure that all of the assets were out of her reach, so now she's stuck with nothing. I can't say I'm surprised, though. She was always in it for the money, and once that dried up, she bailed. As for my dad, I haven't spoken to him since I told him I wasn't ready to have a relationship unless he took full responsibility for everything. And honestly, I think it's going to stay that way for a while. He's still living in denial, clinging to this idea that it's somehow my fault or Grandpa's fault for how things turned out. He refuses to see how he let himself get manipulated by my stepmom and stepsister. Until he can own up to his part in all of this, I don't see us having any kind of relationship. It sucks, but I've made peace with it. Grandpa, on the other hand, is doing great. He's been a rock for me through all of this, and we've grown even closer since everything came to light. We've talked a lot about the future, and he's made it clear that he wants to make sure I'm taken care of, especially after everything I've been through. So yeah, I guess this is the end of the road for this saga. My dad, stepmom, and stepsister are finally facing the consequences of their actions, and I'm moving forward with my life. I'm in a much better place now, both financially and emotionally, and I have no intention of letting any of them drag me down again. It's been a wild ride, but I'm proud of where I've ended up. Thank you to every single person who took time out of their day to leave comments and help me out. I hope to come back here one day, maybe 5 years down the line, and tell you all about how much better my life has gotten.